Hello and welcome to this episode. I wasn't planning on recording today. I was aware it's been almost a week since my last episode, and I'd preferred to have something recorded earlier, but that's how it's been. And spontaneously there was an urge to record in this moment. I was planning to record tomorrow, but suddenly the urge arose and here we are. So perhaps we can all just settle and take some conscious breaths. Feel your inner body. Be aware of perhaps your feet on the floor, your body resting in a chair if you are sitting. And perhaps just relax the face. Sometimes when we are listening to something, there can be a tension there, a wanting to learn or absorb or catch every word. And just know that the words spoken are not that important. As we've read in The Power of Now, those same words, that everything's only relatively important. But more important than the words is just simply being in this space of now. Being aware that everything arises in the vastness. No matter how sharp the thought, how overwhelming, it's always in the vastness of now. There may be a mirage where all we can see or feel is just a thought and the emotion from it. And often this mirage arises when it's a negative thought, when something painful, overwhelming happens. It's just, that's all that there is, this pain. But there is always the option to see that the emotion, that the thought is arising in the space, the vast space of this present moment. In the short silence, just allow that to absorb, just allow the silence to almost cleanse what's not needed in this moment. Maybe your mind is thinking about something for later today, but just allow the silent space to just brush that aside, to cleanse that away. It's not needed here. And there is the ability to just drop it and let it go. I thought I'd start before we dip into the power of now. Perhaps I can read out a quote. And on my Twitter feed, I do have several accounts I follow, which tweet out quotes from different traditions, but they're all pointing to that oneness. So often I use social media to read these quotes or to check in with that, and often it can be difficult for some people with social media to get into a habit of looking at certain accounts, or the habitual unconsciousness of social media where you're comparing and contrasting, or you're absorbing content, and only you know if that's helping you or if that's some benefit to you as well, and only you know if it's having a negative effect to you also. So again, it's good to outline there is no good and bad accounts. You should follow these accounts, you shouldn't follow those accounts. So here I'm following a lot, many spiritual accounts, and that's neither good or bad, but the one thing I do get from it is it brings me back into the now. And I wanted to share a simple quote by Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. And I have a copy of the Tao Te Ching. It's been translated by Dr. Wayne Dyer. It has many translations. It's a relatively short book. I believe it's 82 verses that Lao Tzu has written. And Lao Tzu says here, by letting go, it all gets done. By letting go, it all gets done. And that is letting go of the mental formations, of your identity, your mind's desires, your mind's fears, letting it all go. And something deeper is getting it done. And it's a non-doing. So a relatively short sentence, but very profound and very deep. Okay, so just put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and perhaps might be good for me to give a brief update, almost a journal on how my week's been. And I've been very aware that it's been a challenging week for me, and there's been lots of unconsciousness in the week as well. And that's how it's been. There's been lots of dysfunction, and there's been action taken that's not been beneficial to my deeper sense of self. I can hold that in my awareness now of how that's been. It doesn't need a story of complaining or connecting with the ego to feel sorry for the week that's been, and I'm aware that perhaps some new habits for this upcoming week will be beneficial. They'll be challenging to create some different habits, but perhaps slowly, there will be almost a new path carved out where the more something is done, the more the groove deepens in that, and it becomes easier to continue this action as well. And it doesn't have to be a huge objective, a huge task. Perhaps we can all just start with one thing. Is there one thing that you can just, okay, from tomorrow, instead of looking at my phone as soon as I wake up, I'm going to do 5 minutes of sitting presence, 5 minutes of connecting to my inner body. I'm going to do. So perhaps you can start small as well. Okay, so we paused at a reflection symbol, I believe, last time. We're still in the section of relationships as a spiritual practice. So we began that, but and the general essence of this in the last section about relationships was you're having a relationship with your essence and the other's essence. You're not having a relationship with that person's ego, their mind. So that was the essence of what Eckhart was talking about there. And what we perceive as love, it's really a need or an addiction to this person of wanting to please them and wanting to receive something from them, wanting them to make you happy or for them to give you love so you feel love. But Eckhart is saying you are love. That's your essence, and once that's recognized, that's all there is, and that then can be recognized in the other person. And then from there will be clarity on, okay, is there an alignment here of a relationship that can exist or continue? And then that will become clear as well. And there isn't that turbulence of love and hate and, today I love you, tomorrow maybe something else. So let's continue the reading. So, whenever your relationship is not working, whenever it brings out the madness in you and in your partner, be glad. What was unconscious is being brought up to the light. It is an opportunity for salvation. Every moment, hold the knowing of that moment, particularly of your inner state. If there is anger, know that there is anger. If there is jealousy, defensiveness, the urge to argue, the need to be right, an inner child demanding love and attention, or emotional pain of any kind, whatever it is, know the reality of that moment and hold the knowing. The relationship then becomes your sadhana, your spiritual practice. If you observe unconscious behavior in your partner, hold it in the loving embrace of your knowing so that you won't react. Unconsciousness and knowing cannot coexist for long. Even if the knowing is only in the other person and not in the one who is acting out the unconsciousness. The energy form that lies behind hostility and attack finds the presence of love absolutely intolerable. If you react at all to your partner's unconsciousness, you become unconscious yourself. But if you then remember to know your reaction, nothing is lost. Humanity is under great pressure to evolve because it is our only chance of survival as a race. This will affect every aspect of your life and close relationships in particular. Never before have relationships been as problematic and conflict-ridden as they are now. As you may have noticed, they are not here to make you happy or fulfilled. If you continue to pursue the goal of salvation through a relationship, you will be disillusioned again and again. But if you accept that the relationship is here to make you conscious instead of happy, then the relationship will offer you salvation, and you will be aligning yourself with the higher consciousness that wants to be born into this world. For those who hold on to the old patterns, there will be increasing pain, violence, confusion, and madness. And this leads to a question by the reader. I suppose that it takes two to make a relationship into a spiritual practice, as you suggest. For example, my partner is still acting out his old patterns of jealousy and control. I have pointed this out many times, but he is unable to see it. And this is Eckhart's response to this comment. How many people does it take to make your life into a spiritual practice? Never mind if your partner will not cooperate. Sanity, consciousness can only come into this world through you. You do not need to wait for the world to become sane or for somebody else to become conscious before you can be enlightened. You may wait forever. Do not accuse each other of being unconscious. The moment you start to argue, you have identified with a mental position and are now defending not only that position, but also your sense of self. The ego is in charge. You have become unconscious. At times, it may be appropriate to point out certain aspects of your partner's behavior. If you are very alert, very present, you can do so without ego involvement, without blaming, accusing, or making the other wrong. When your partner behaves unconsciously, relinquish all judgment. Judgment is either to confuse someone's unconscious behavior with who they are, or to project your own unconsciousness onto another person and mistake that for who they are. To relinquish judgment does not mean that you do not recognize dysfunction and unconsciousness when you see it. It means being the knowing rather than being the reaction and the judge. You will then either be totally free of reaction, or you may react and still be the knowing, the space in which the reaction is watched and allowed to be. Instead of fighting the darkness, you bring in the light. Instead of reacting to delusion, you see the delusion, yet at the same time look through it. Being the knowing creates a clear space of loving presence that allows all things and all people to be as they are. No greater catalyst for transformation exists. If you practice this, your partner cannot stay with you and remain unconscious. If you both agree that the relationship will be your spiritual practice, so much the better. You can then express your thoughts and feelings to each other as soon as they occur, or as soon as a reaction comes up, so that you do not create a time gap in which an unexpressed or unacknowledged emotion or grievance can fester and grow. Learn to give expression to what you feel without blaming. Learn to listen to your partner in an open, non-defensive way. Give your partner space for expressing himself or herself. Be present. Accusing, defending, attacking, all those patterns that are designed to strengthen or protect the ego or to get its needs met will then become redundant. Giving space to others and to yourself is vital. Love cannot flourish without it. When you have removed the two factors that are destructive to relationships, when the pain body has transmuted and you are no longer identified with mind and mental positions, and if your partner has done the same, you will experience the bliss of the flowering of relationship. Instead of mirroring each other, your pain and your unconsciousness, instead of satisfying your mutual addictive ego needs, you will reflect back to each other the love that you feel deep within, the love that comes with realization of your oneness with all that is. This is the love that has no opposite. If your partner is still identified with the mind and the pain body while you are already free, this will represent a major challenge, not to you, but to your partner. It is not easy to live with an enlightened person, or rather, it is so easy that the ego finds it extremely threatening. Remember that the ego needs problems, conflict, and enemies to strengthen the sense of separateness, on which its identity depends. The unenlightened partner's mind will be deeply frustrated because its fixed positions are not resisted, which means they will become shaky and weak, and there is even the danger that they may collapse altogether, resulting in loss of self. The pain body is demanding feedback and not getting it. The need for argument, drama, and conflict is not being met. But beware, some people who are unresponsive, withdrawn, insensitive, or cut off from their feelings may think and try to convince others that they are enlightened, or at least that there is nothing wrong with them and everything wrong with their partner. Men tend to do that more than women. They may see their female partners as irrational or emotional. But if you can feel your emotions, you are not far from the radiant inner body just underneath. If you are mainly in your head, the distance is much greater, and you need to bring consciousness into the emotional body before you can reach the inner body. If there isn't an emanation of love and joy, complete presence and openness toward all beings, then it is not enlightenment. Another indicator is how a person behaves in difficult or challenging situations, or when things go wrong. If your enlightenment is egoic self-delusion, then life will soon give you a challenge that will bring out your unconsciousness in whatever form, as fear, anger, defensiveness, judgment, depression, and so on. If you are in a relationship, many of your challenges will come through your partner. For example, a woman may be challenged by an unresponsive male partner who lives almost entirely in his head. She will be challenged by his inability to hear her, to give her attention and space to be, which is due to his lack of presence. The absence of love in the relationship, which is usually more keenly felt by a woman than a man, will trigger the woman's pain body, and through it she will attack her partner, blame, criticize, make wrong, and so on. This in turn now becomes his challenge to defend himself against her pain body's attack, which he sees as totally unwarranted. He will become even more deeply entrenched in his mental positions as he justifies, defends himself, or counterattacks. Eventually, this may activate his own pain body. When both partners have thus been taken over, a level of deep unconsciousness has been reached, of emotional violence, savage attack, and counterattack. It will not subside until both pain bodies have replenished themselves and then enter the dormant stage. Until the next time. This is only one of an endless number of possible scenarios. Many volumes have been written, and many more could be written, about the ways in which unconsciousness is brought out in male-female relationships. But as I said earlier, once you understand the root of the dysfunction, you do not need to explore its countless manifestations. Let's briefly look again at the scenario I have just described. Every challenge that it contains is actually a disguised opportunity for salvation. At every stage of the unfolding dysfunctional process, freedom from unconsciousness is possible. For example, the woman's hostility could become a signal for the man to come out of his mind-identified state, awaken into the now, become present, instead of becoming even more identified with his mind, even more unconscious. Instead of being the pain body, the woman could be the knowing that watches the emotional pain in herself, thus accessing the power of the now and initiating the transmutation of the pain. This would remove the compulsive and automatic outward projection of it. She could then express her feelings to her partner. There is no guarantee, of course, that he will listen, but it gives him a good chance to become present and certainly breaks the insane cycle of the involuntary acting out of old mind patterns. If the woman misses that opportunity, the man could watch his own mental emotional reaction to her pain, his own defensiveness, rather than being the reaction. He could then watch his own pain body being triggered and thus bring consciousness into his emotions. In this way, a clear and still space of pure awareness would come into being, the knowing, the silent witness, the watcher. This awareness does not deny the pain, and yet it is beyond it. It allows the pain to be, and yet transmutes it at the same time. It accepts everything and transforms everything. A door would have opened. A door would have opened up for her, through which she could easily join him in that space. If you are consistently, or at least predominantly, present in your relationship, this will be the greatest challenge for your partner. They will not be able to tolerate your presence for very long and stay unconscious. If they are ready, they will walk through the door that you opened for them and join you in that state. If they are not, you will separate like oil and water. The light is too painful for someone who wants to remain in darkness. So that's the end of the section titled Relationships as Spiritual Practice. And again, it seems this is a continuation on from the advice in the previous episode. So we began with an earlier section of what makes an unconscious relationship, or the challenges of an unconscious relationship, and now we are talking about the fruit of a conscious relationship. And Eckhart has guided us of how that can begin to grow in a relationship. By catching our mind patterns of responding to somebody else's pain instead of reacting to it. So you're responding with a knowing of what is happening in this moment. And you are not simply lost in your defensiveness or in your judgment, and you're not just simply reacting, which is not controlled. And it's done in an unawareness. And it's quite clear, because very often after, if you were to say something in the heat of the moment in anger, it's only when later on that unconsciousness is, or that pain body has receded, you'll look at what you've said and there'll be deep regret there, deep pain, knowing that wasn't really you that said that. There's something that recognizes the unconscious. And Eckhart talks about a challenge because there are two beings in a relationship. There could be a case of where one wants to awaken and one may not. And that will almost take care of itself in that sense. As Eckhart says, once you become present, there's a door open for that person to join you. And it takes care of itself because the person will either want to do that, there'll be a calling to join, to raise their own level of consciousness, or there'll be a reaction to that, a clear sign that they're not ready for that, or they would like to remain, as what Eckhart talks is, in darkness, meaning in unconsciousness. And I feel we're reading this chapter, it doesn't matter, if you're in a relationship or not, or the scenario of your relationship, what's being said is getting to the root of it. So it almost, you can relate to it no matter how complicated the relationship is. Or even in a non-existent relationship, if you're single, this can be great to work on this as well. And in some ways it can prepare you for when a relationship does, if it does come, then there will be some maturity there for you, and perhaps you will avoid a lot of pain. And of course you can use this for not just an intimate relationship, but for family members and friends. And perhaps in this time in this time of quarantine, you may be stuck indoors with somebody who you may see them as unconscious, or they may have a negative impact on you. And perhaps some of these practices can be put in place. So when that person is being unconscious in communicating with you in that manner, perhaps you can meet that with spaciousness, a listening without judgment. And Eckhart refers to, dealing with people as one of the most challenging things, which is why I think previously he mentioned, when beginning this practice of being aware and being spacious, that perhaps people can be, a situation you deal with later once your practice has matured. But perhaps with the current circumstances, you can, begin almost protecting your own peace that you are. Because I find often when dealing with an unconscious person that, you're dealing with them in that moment and you're absorbing the unconsciousness, and then later on, that's still going around in your head. It's still over and over creating those same emotions, even though you've gone back to your room, or the interaction is finished. It's still having a hold on you. It's still causing that toxicity in your body and in your mind. And perhaps some of what's being said here can cut out a lot of pain. It's not to say that straight away you'll be a sage in front of this person and nothing will penetrate. You'll be just a wall of peace, but it's a place to begin, to a direct experience, to be aware of the unconsciousness in you. You're not there to fix this person or to, perhaps you can be there to help them recognize in themselves what's happening, but you can also protect yourself and progress in your own practice, where you can be aware of the mind patterns, of defensiveness coming up in you as well, and just simply watch them. And perhaps when there's communication to this person, if you're responding to them, it won't be an emotional reaction where you're defending something or pushing back. You will be simply speaking out of a calm, still place when you're expressing your feelings to that person. It won't be coated in anger and an egoic need to repair something or to take revenge on that person or to attack them back if you've been attacked by the other person. There will be a very clear dialogue that's coming from that place of clarity. And it could be something extremely simple. Someone is, for example, raising their voice, yelling. You could just simply put your hand up and say, I need you to stop. And I need to go, and we will talk about this later. Or whatever words come that will come from that presence. You won't need to figure out in some ways what to say. That presence will come up into the mind, and of what's needed to be said in that moment will be said. And there'll be a different quality to the words as well. And you may get a reaction from the other person of, okay, there's something different happening here. It's not, and so okay, so I think I'll end the episode here. I thought I would perhaps set the intention of recording tomorrow as well, and so I thought I would try not to record too long of an episode today, and perhaps I'll record tomorrow or sooner than a week is my intention, so I can continue this for myself and for you listening also. Okay, so thank you for joining me for today's episode. I wish you well in this one moment, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. If you have an urge to support this podcast, you're more than welcome to visit my Patreon page, and you can find the link in the description of the episode. There you will find a little bit more information about myself and my journey and my purpose with helping others. You can also share and review this podcast. These are two simple ways to create awareness and spread these teachings, and it will also help future listeners to discover this content as well. Thank you.